A female student's body was found dumped in a wilderness area. A forensic pathologist conducted an examination and unexpectedly discovered a shocking clue on the corpse. Upon receiving the report, Detective Jung Hyun of the Major Crimes Unit immediately arrived at the scene and found the victim's body tightly wrapped in plastic film, bearing signs of brutal torture. To quickly solve the case, Jung Hyun sought the help of forensic pathologist Seyan from the National Forensic Science Bureau. Seyan was a renowned forensic pathologist nationwide. From the Seoul Medical School entrance exam to the National Medical Licensing exam, she was always the youngest person to pass. With her keen observation skills and exceptional deductive abilities, she had single-handedly examined and successfully solved many complex and difficult cases, earning her the title of forensic genius. Receiving the case file and the body from Jung Hyun, Sehyun immediately began the examination. The autopsy results revealed that the victim's eyeballs had been removed, there were signs of injection marks, a broken neck, and all internal organs, except the stomach, were missing. A bleach smell lingered in the abdominal cavity. For an experienced forensic pathologist, these details, though gruesome, weren't entirely unexpected. The real shock came when Sehyun discovered a long strand of yarn hidden inside the body. The moment she saw it, she was almost speechless, because she had seen an identical strand of yarn when she was a child. The next day, guided by Jung Hyun, Sehyun arrived at the crime scene and, upon observation, found no trace of any suspicious activity. The killer's methods were incredibly clean, from the body riddled with signs of tampering, the crime scene flawless, to the way they disposed of the remains, all indicating an unusual level of skill, leading Sehyun to believe this was definitely not the killer's first murder. What puzzled Sehyun was that a perpetrator like that could have concealed everything much more carefully, yet they brazenly placed the body in the middle of a field, as if hoping someone would discover it, seemingly trying to send some kind of special message. After finishing the crime scene investigation, Sehyun reminded Jung Hyun to check the surveillance camera at the intersection. Although the camera couldn't directly capture the crime scene, based on the condition of the body, Sehyun surmised that the perpetrator had used a large vehicle to transport the body. However, there were no corresponding tire tracks around the scene, indicating the perpetrator had taken a different route, and therefore, the camera at the intersection likely recorded the vehicle. Jung Hyun noted down all the suspicious points Sehyun raised. Afterward, he intended to invite her to dinner, but before he could speak, Sehyun coldly turned her back and walked away. In contrast to the enthusiastic and upright Jung Hyun, Sehyun, a forensic genius, harbors a dark side that outsiders find difficult to fathom. After work, she habitually feeds cats in a small alley. Once, a woman loudly berated Sehyun, claiming that her act of feeding the cats would attract many stray cats, affecting her business. Sehyun didn't retort, but slowly approached the woman, a cold, cruel smile on her lips. This sinister aura, emanating from her very core, was something Sehyun always tried to conceal. Occasionally, she visits her mother in the hospital, who is constantly hospitalized and doesn't even recognize her daughter. Strangely, even when standing before her mother, Sehyun's eyes remain cold, and she even tightly grips her mother's wrist. Not long after, the murder of the female student was discovered by the media, and under the spread of public opinion, the case quickly became a sensation, causing public alarm. Because woolen threads were found in the victim's body, the perpetrator was given the nickname the Tailor. Under pressure from her superiors, Jung Hyun contacted Sehyun a second time to inquire about the progress of the autopsy. Just as Sehyun was about to reply, she unexpectedly discovered another clue under the microscope, leaving her stunned once again. However, for some reason, Sehyun chose to lie to Jung Hyun, saying that no crucial clue had yet been found. After the call, Sehyun went to see a colleague to ask if any mold had been found on the female student's body. The colleague confirmed that a particular type of mold had indeed appeared on the body. Seeing that Sehyun seemed to have a hunch, the colleague asked her to share, but Sehyun blurted out a lie, saying that many years ago, during her anatomy internship, she had handled a body covered in mold, and had to use disinfectant and a brush to scrub away the growing mold in the autopsy room. On the female student's body, both mold and disinfectant were found, leading her colleague to speculate that the killer, like Sehyun, likely possessed some medical knowledge. However, Sehyun believed the opposite was true, arguing that ordinary people use brushes to wash dishes and disinfectant to clean floors, and that in the killer's mind, humans were probably nothing more than dirt to be discarded. Her colleague then informed her of another clue. Tiny plastic fragments originating from toothbrush bristles had been found in the mold, leaving Sehyun stunned once again. All these clues reminded her of a particular person, someone who had been dead for a long time. On the day of the crime scene investigation, after completing their work, Seyan and her colleague, Dr. Oh, boarded the bus to return home. Due to a past case, a disagreement arose between the two. to, with Dr. O wanting Seyan to hand over the autopsy of that case to him, arguing that Seyan's taking on the case was not based on truth or the prestige of forensic science, but simply on personal ambition for advancement. Seyan angrily got out of the car, completely unaware that a tragedy was about to unfold. The following night, the police received another report of a body discovered in an alley, marking the second murder in recent times. Journalists immediately suspected a series of murders, believing the killer was still the mysterious Taylor. Jung-hyun arrived at the scene and noticed that this time the body was much more severely mutilated, even dismembered. The killer had also cut off the victim's fingertips, making it impossible for the police to identify the perpetrator using fingerprints. Jung-hyun shared the media's opinion, believing this wasn't a copycat case, but directly related to the previous murder of the female student, forming a chain of murders. Therefore, he once again approached Seyan, asking her to urgently conduct an autopsy and also informing her that wool fibers had been found in this body as well. Upon hearing this, Seyan quickly proceeded to examine the body parts and discovered that each piece had been perfectly sewn back together by the killer. Inside one piece, the killer had even placed a severed finger of the victim, tied with thread in a bow. Coincidentally, this was the same knot Seyan was accustomed to using during autopsies, although no one knew that this habit had been influenced by someone many years ago. Soon after, the results of the fingerprint analysis of the severed finger were released, and upon seeing the results, Seyan was shocked to realize it was the fingerprint of her colleague, Dr. Fabio. Dr. Ao had been absent from work for some unknown reason in recent days, and combined with the analysis results, it was almost certain that Dr. Ao was the victim who had been brutally dismembered. As a colleague of the victim, Seyan is forced to accept questioning as a related party, and Jung-hyun begins asking her about details related to the case. According to Seyan's testimony that evening, riding the bus together was the last time she saw Dr. O. Jung-hyun trusted Seyan, but what puzzled him was that, according to surveillance camera footage, Dr. Oo had clearly returned to Seoul that night, while the body was found in a different location called Jongcheon. Seyan felt a vague unease, because when she was a child, the place her father liked to take her to most was Jongcheon. Moreover, her father had once asked her as a child to help him clean bloodstains from the floor with a brush. Yet, in front of Jung-hyun, Seyan lied, claiming she knew nothing. In secret, Seyan acted stealthily, seeking out a forensic colleague to inquire further about the autopsy. The colleague stated that the student's body contained traces of a certain drug that could cause muscle paralysis and, if used in high doses, could lead to death. Seyan couldn't believe what she heard, because that type of medicine also appeared in her memories related to her father. While reminiscing, Seyan suddenly realized another important clue when she discovered two photos extracted as evidence from the dismemberment case, showing many incomplete fingerprints on a roll of adhesive tape. Realizing that adhesive tape often retains fingerprints, Seyan went to see her forensic colleagues and asked them to re-examine the tape stuck to the plastic film from the first case. The results of the examination showed that there was indeed a strange fingerprint on the tape, and a comparison showed that this fingerprint perfectly matched the fingerprint in the evidence photo from the dismemberment case. This discovery once again stirred up Seyan's memories, because years ago, when she was a child helping her father clean up blood, she had left her fingerprints on the plastic film. During the investigation, the woman who had loudly criticized Seyan for feeding stray cats called the police, claiming that the cats Seyan had fed had been tragically killed. The woman insisted that Seyan was responsible, but Seyan remained calm, her gaze cold and unwavering, asserting that the woman's accusation was completely unfounded. Upon returning to the office, Seyan immediately threw away all the cat food in the cupboard. Just then, Jung-hyun called to inform Seyan that they had apprehended the serial killer. The previous night, through reviewing surveillance camera footage at a crossroads, the police discovered a suspicious truck. The truck's departure perfectly matched the time the police suspected the killer had left the scene. After identifying the truck driver, Jung-hyun and his team immediately went to the suspect's house. Upon seeing the police, he fled, and after a chase and pursuit, Jung-hyun successfully apprehended him. Upon hearing that the suspect had been apprehended, Sehyun was distraught and hastily made an excuse to submit the autopsy results before heading to the police station. Jung-hyun revealed that the perpetrator had not yet confessed, but that not only after the murder occurred, but even 3 hours prior, a security camera at a restaurant the female student had visited had captured images of this person. Jung-hyun asserted that this was the culprit and showed Sehyun the camera footage. Seeing the blurry figure in the photo, Sehyun requested to meet the suspect. Jung-hyun agreed, and with a feeling of unease, Sehyun entered the interrogation room. However, the moment she saw the suspect, she breathed a sigh of relief, because it was clear that the man before her was was not the person she had suspected, and moreover, the suspect adamantly denied the crime. Police said someone had seen him unloading what appeared to be a corpse from his car, but the suspect claimed that what people called a corpse was actually just a sex doll. Further investigation revealed that the warehouse where he parked his car contained no evidence of a murder, only a large number of sex dolls. Provoked by the suspect, one of Jung Hyun's subordinates lost his temper and assaulted him. Enraged, the suspect, after being released, complained to the media about the police's violent behavior. To protect his subordinate, as the team leader, Jung Hyun decided to hold an emergency press conference. Before the press conference, his colleagues discovered a new clue. On the night Seyan and Dr. Oh were on the bus, a strange man sitting in the back seat had been staring at them. To appease the rising public outcry, his colleagues hoped Jung Hyun would mention this detail at the upcoming press conference, letting the media and the public know that the police had information about a potential suspect. However, at the press conference, finding no evidence to support the suspect's claim, Jung Hyun did not reveal this clue to the media. The journalists refused to give up, relentlessly questioning the police about whether the two cases were a series of murders. Just as Jung Hyun was fumbling, Seyan appeared, explaining to the media that the forensic doctor had found suspicious fingerprints on the female student's body, but because the fingerprints were incomplete, they couldn't be used to identify the killer. Furthermore, Seyan revealed to the press that the fingerprints found in both cases matched perfectly, a detail sufficient to prove the police's current assessment that the two cases were indeed a series of murders. When the journalists pressed her about the killer's identity, Seyan, with a sharp gaze and sarcastic tone, stated that the killer was merely a narcissistic and ignorant scoundrel. After the press conference, Jung Hyun led his team in compiling all the clues, while Seyan drove alone to Jongcheon, believing that there, all the mysteries might be solved. In Jongcheon, there's a special laundromat whose owner, a former exemplary citizen, is a kind and beloved local man. He has a peculiar habit. He enjoys watching programs featuring Seyan while ironing clothes, as Seyan frequently appears on legal programs and has offered expert opinions on autopsy procedures on television. A few days ago, Jung Hyun's subordinates visited the laundromat to investigate, having heard that the murdered college student was a regular customer. However, due to their initial positive impression of the owner, the police never suspected him, only asking if he had seen anyone suspicious. Upon hearing that Seyan would personally be at the crime scene to conduct the autopsy, a barely perceptible smile flickered across the owner's face. That evening, a young woman came to the laundromat and loudly complained to the owner about staining her clothes. The owner explained that when the woman brought her clothes in, she seemed unusually cheerful and was very talkative. He walked among the hanging clothes and, judging by the woman's figure, selected an old outfit that a customer had left behind. The woman felt something was amiss and tried to sneak away, but the owner grabbed her from behind. Inside the shop, the owner stroked the woman's long hair, forcing her to look at the clothes he had chosen, and then flashed a devilish smile. Meanwhile, Seyan returned to Jongcheon, a place she dared not return to, but was forced to face. As soon as she arrived, she rented a house directly across from the Jongcheon police station. Coincidentally, the landlady was the head of the neighborhood women's association and also a frequent neighbor of the shop owner. So when the woman asked the shop owner to replace her door lock, he learned that the famous female forensic pathologist from Seoul had moved to Jongcheon. During their conversation, the shop owner also briefly mentioned that tomorrow was the anniversary of the deaths of his deceased wife and child. The neighbors all sympathized with the old man, who was so kind and always spoke of his past so gently, but no one knew the true face hidden behind that gentle mask. At Jongcheon, Seyan sat by a pillar, her face heavy with sorrow, where a yellowed advertising flyer she had pasted up as a child still lay. Facing it, the memories Seyan had tried to bury suddenly flooded back violently. As a child, Seyan had a father who was like a monster. On her birthday, he murdered his wife. Yet, when she saw her mother's blood-soaked body and her murderous father walking towards her, Seyan felt no fear, nor did she scream. Instead, she calmly went into the bathroom, got a rag, and helped her father clean up her mother's blood from the floor. And Seyan's murderous father was none other than the shop owner. Since returning to Jongcheon, Seyan has lived in utter fear, as if her father had found her and was whispering mocking laughter in her ear. And now, hidden beneath the facade of a kind man, the shopkeeper's murderous nature remains unchanged. That night, the shopkeeper went to a white van, inside which lay the corpse of the woman who had caused trouble at the laundry shop. He had killed her. But unlike typical murderers, the shopkeeper harbored a deranged fascination with the human anatomy and an extreme obsession with anatomical perfection. At the same time, Jung Hyun also arrived in Jongcheon to investigate the movements of the second victim, Seyan's colleague Fabio, on the night he was murdered. After all, Jongcheon was where the killer disposed of of the body. Based on the surveillance camera footage from the bus that day, Jung-hyun focused his suspicion on a suspicious man who boarded and alighted the bus at almost the same time as Seyan and Fabio. Following the man's movements captured on surveillance cameras, Jung-hyun traced the trail to a small alley and discovered that his route perfectly matched Fabio's home. Unfortunately, nearby surveillance cameras didn't record anything further. While wandering around searching, he unexpectedly encountered Seyan. Without any suspicion, Jung-hyun told her all the clues he had found. The fact that the killer could skillfully evade dozens of surveillance cameras showed that he was extremely familiar with the terrain of Jongcheon. At this moment, a forensic colleague called Seyan to inform her that a large amount of a drug component had been found in Fabio's body, identical to the one found in the female student's body in the first case. However, after ending the call, when faced with Jung-hyun's questioning, Seyan chose to lie, claiming that no drug components had been found in either case. Seyan knew better than anyone that the culprit behind both murders was undoubtedly her own father. As the police gathered more clues that could uncover an unacceptable secret from the past, Seyan realized she had to find him before the police could. That night, Seyan was walking down an alley when she suddenly saw the body of a woman at the end of the street. The victim was the same woman who had caused trouble at the laundromat. The body had been perfectly dismembered, the parts sewn together with red thread. This sight reminded Seyan of her childhood rag doll, because she had sewn her own doll in exactly the same way these body parts were sewn together. While lost in her memories, a strange phone number suddenly called. Seyan answered and froze, because the voice on the other end was none other than her father's. Today is Seyan's birthday, and on the phone her father sends birthday wishes, saying that the body in the alley is his birthday gift to his daughter, causing Seyan to try to calm herself down and locate her father. Just then, a bottle was unexpectedly thrown from not far away. Following the direction of the bottle, Seyan entered another alley and discovered a suitcase containing a seaweed rice roll. Understanding her father's intentions, Seyan looked down at her wrist, where the scar from a stray dog bite from her childhood still remained. Back then, her father had warned her that when facing a vicious dog, the more she tried to pull her hand away, the tighter it would bite. The real thing to do was to plunge her hand deep into its throat, preventing it from breathing. And now, with her father having bitten her, Seyan vowed to take revenge on him the same way she had taken revenge on the vicious dog years ago, by strangling him. After declaring war, with a determined look in her eyes, Seyan devoured the rice roll in the suitcase, determined to force her father to acknowledge a painful retaliation. Not long after, the police received a report and arrived at the scene. This was already the third dismemberment case. When they discovered Seyan was the one who reported the crime, the officers became suspicious. They couldn't understand why a renowned forensic pathologist like Seyan would be in Jongcheon, especially since VNQ was taking this case more seriously than ever. Her relentless questioning and sharp tone left them speechless. However, one officer noticed that Seyan barely blinked during the conversation, seemingly trying to confirm whether they believed her. In contrast, Jung-hyun completely trusted Seyan, worried about her potential danger during the investigation, and gave her a smartwatch with an emergency alert function. A short while later, Seyan proceeded to examine the woman's body found in the alley. The cuts and stitches were eerily perfect. When she removed the stitches from the victim's mouth, she discovered something hidden inside. Upon taking it out, she found a photograph of herself as a child, making the man's intentions all too clear. Seyan tried to hide her unease and showed the photo to Jung-hyun, who was waiting outside. Jung-hyun took a picture. Throughout the process, Seyan kept her head down, afraid of being discovered. Jung-hyun suddenly remembered an unsolved case from decades ago, the Blue Barrel case. At that time, body parts were found in a blue barrel, and examination revealed they had been scrubbed with detergent and a brush, and also contained traces of medication. The police suspected that this case and the three current cases were committed by the same perpetrator. If they found the same medication in the bodies this time, they could combine the Blue Barrel case with the current cases for joint investigation. Seyan blurted out a counter-argument, saying that such speculation was far-fetched, since the Blue Barrel case didn't have any red thread. Unexpectedly, this very statement revealed her weakness. Jung-hyun immediately realized that he hadn't mentioned whether the Blue Barrel case had a red thread or not. Seyan hastily lied, claiming she had also seen the case file, but in reality, the Blue Barrel case from years ago was committed by Seyan's father. Jung-hyun considered the newly found photograph the most important clue. The technical department analyzed it and planned to recreate the appearance of the girl in the photo as an adult. Meanwhile, Seyan went to the scene of the Blue Barrel case. She entered a small, dilapidated house, but the interior had been cleaned and painted. In the middle of the room was an anatomy textbook and a set of surgical instruments deliberately placed there. Seyan knew knew perfectly well that these were things her father had left for her. Just then, a little girl, about 7 or 8 years old, approached. Seyan was astonished to realize that from her hairstyle to her eyes, the girl in front of her was exactly like her own image from years ago. Hearing the little girl call out, "Dad!" Seyan stepped outside. On the opposite side, her father, the shop owner, was slowly walking towards her. He reached out to embrace his daughter, but Seyan recoiled in astonishment, because years ago, she had clearly witnessed her father fall off the cliff. Her father explained that a herb gatherer had passed by and saved him. During the conversation, her father clearly expressed his dissatisfaction with the current Seyan, not only because she had changed her name, but also because she seemed to have undergone plastic surgery. Seyan's gaze shifted to the little girl standing next to her father. At this point, the shop owner explained that the girl was an orphan he had found on the roadside and was now Seyan's younger sister, causing Seyan to smirk. She immediately guessed that this girl was just like herself in the past, merely an assistant helping her father clean up the crime scene, and he wanted Seyan back so they could continue their killing game as before. The father doing the murders, the daughter handling the aftermath. Seyan was silent for a moment, then suddenly lunged at her father, pulling out a scalpel to attack, but unexpectedly, he easily parried and subdued her, while the shop owner continued to mock the current Seyan. However, Seyan was no longer the helpless little girl she once was. She frantically bit her father's hand, then grabbed the knife that had fallen to the ground and lunged at him. Unexpectedly, her younger sister, standing behind her, suddenly used a taser on her, causing Seyan to fall into her father's arms and lose consciousness in an instant. When she woke up, Seyan found herself covered in blood, a blue bucket beside her, and her father had taken the surgical knife. After this direct confrontation, her fear had become even more terrifying. Today, Seyan went to Songcheon High School to find the girl her father had adopted, but nearby, she discovered a recently completed portrait sketch of herself. The police, after examining it, noticed that the woman in the sketch had eyes and eyebrows very similar to Seyan's, but only the eyes and eyebrows. Other facial features seemed completely different. While Seyan couldn't find the girl at school, Junghyun went to the owner's laundry shop and, through investigation, learned that the third victim had come there to have her clothes laundered before she died. However, when confronted by the police, the shop owner reacted with remarkable calmness. He took out the register and pointed out that the girl had indeed come to drop off her laundry but hadn't returned to pick it up. Despite this, Junghyun remained suspicious of the owner. He checked the laundry room and found a black bucket hat that closely resembled the one the suspect had worn on the bus that night. Additionally, the laundry contained numerous detergents and ordinary brushes, all of which could be crucial evidence related to the cases. While Junghyun was talking to his colleague, Seyan approached from the opposite direction. He quickly noticed a wound on her face and what appeared to be faint blood stains on her neck, and immediately requested Seyan to provide the drug analysis reports from the 2 previous cases. Seyan promised to send it to him tonight, but when faced with the forensic report, which had been available for a long time, after much hesitation and consideration, she decided to revise the content, changing the drug component detection result to undetectable. Just then, her father, the shop owner, called. During the call, Seyan mentioned that her sketch had been plastered all over Jongcheon, and her father threatened that if she didn't obediently comply, he would send her more gifts. To protect herself, Seyan decided to compromise with her father, suggesting they find a scapegoat to completely end the matter. The specific plan was that her father would hand over the body and organs to the EO forensic department through her. She would then attach someone else's DNA to the body to divert the police investigation. Her father accepted the offer, saying he had prepared a scapegoat and instructed Sehyun to go to the victim's house to collect DNA. He would be responsible for placing the DNA on the body parts and disposing of them. Seyan only needed to conduct the autopsy according to procedure, and once the DNA owner was confirmed, everything would be successful. That night, following the address her father gave her, Seyan drove to the scapegoat's house. Here, she obtained hair and other items for DNA testing, but soon after, Seyan was horrified to discover that the man chosen as the scapegoat was still in the house. He was severely injured, and beside him was her father's surgical instruments. At this point, Seyan realized with shock that her father had no intention of letting the man survive. He wanted her, his daughter, to kill him. Suddenly, the injured man regained consciousness and struggled with Seyan. In that life-or-death struggle, she was forced to fight back desperately. Finally, Seyan, disregarding everything, brutally killed the man. Looking at her bloodied reflection in the mirror, Seyan understood that she, who had tried everything to escape her past, had ultimately become a monster, just like her father. While his daughter was committing the murder, the shop owner sat in a nearby car, intently watching the entire event. He even instructed his adopted daughter to secretly place a hidden camera in front of the door. This camera clearly recorded Seyan, carrying a suitcase out of the house. After the murder, Seyan dismembered the body according to her father's instructions. Her father then called, and the two reached an agreement and planned to dispose of the body parts to frame someone else. Next, Seyan asked her father to bring the forensic body, considering this the final step in completing the incriminating plan. The shop owner drove to the meeting point, but Seyan disappeared. When the shop owner curiously checked the trunk of his car, Seyan unexpectedly attacked him from behind. It turned out this was her real plan, to kill her father and then create false evidence on the body to frame him as the murderer behind the series of murders. Once his body was discovered, all these nightmares would end forever. But faced with the girl determined to take his life, the shopkeeper not only showed no fear, but also burst into laughter. Seyan no longer hesitated. She pulled out the rope, preparing to end this evil man's life. Unexpectedly, at that very moment, the horn of her father's truck suddenly blared loudly. Seyan smashed the car window and discovered her father's adopted daughter inside. By continuously honking the horn, the girl was buying her father time. At that instant, the devil broke free from his restraints and lunged towards Sehyun, repeatedly beating her, snarling that he wouldn't kill her, but would definitely make her suffer punishment. Fortunately, at that moment, the neighborhood security guard appeared, giving Sehyun a chance to escape. After running home, Sehyun saw a blue box placed in the middle of the living room. In an instant, hallucinations flashed through her mind, all related to her father. Sehyun gradually realized that perhaps for the rest of her life, she would never escape the control of her evil father. Running out of the house, she met Jung-hyun, who took her to his home. Here, Jung-hyun discovered the broken blue box. Sehyun went to take a shower, her mood gradually stabilizing, while Jung-hyun patiently and gently applied a pain-relieving patch to her leg wound, then quietly sat beside her and talked. He asked why she chose to be a forensic pathologist all those years ago, because Jung-hyun had actually suspected Sehyun before. That morning, he received the forensic report she sent. When he saw the three large words, "cannot be examined," suspicion immediately arose in his heart, because previously, in a murder case involving an athlete, Sehyun's forensic report had also contained those three words. Not long after, a forensic colleague of Sehyun's contacted Jung-hyun, saying that in the third case, they had also discovered a type of muscle relaxant, identical to the two previous cases. Jung-hyun couldn't believe it, because this completely contradicted the contents of the forensic report Sehyun had given him. To confirm, he contacted Sehyun's subordinate and obtained a written report, which indeed stated that the body contained traces of drugs. At this point, Jung-hyun was certain that Sehyun had deceived him. Recalling Sehyun's strange behavior over the past few days, coupled with the portrait sketch that bore a striking resemblance to her, Jung-hyun, for the first time in his life, began to harbor suspicions about Sehyun. Facing the police's questioning, Sehyun replied that she became a forensic pathologist because she wanted to uncover the truth and bring justice to the victims and their families. These were words that came from the bottom of her heart. Looking at the shattered blue box in the house, Jung-hyun's emotions became incredibly complex. He intended to ask about his inner turmoil, but Sehyun interrupted him. She said that Jung-hyun was a good person and hoped he would persevere in investigating the case to the end, not giving up. This made Jung-hyun vaguely feel that something was amiss, as if Sehyun intended to withdraw from the case. Under her father's manipulation, Sehyun tried to pin all of his serial murders on a man, intending to make him a scapegoat, but in the struggle, she murdered him, and all of this was part of her evil father's plan. After committing the crime, Sehyun awoke from her nightmare. At that moment, her father called, and the shop owner urgently wanted to see his daughter to help her clean up the mess. Sehyun still showed disgust and anger, declaring that she would handle the rest herself. The shop owner only laughed coldly, saying that he believed his daughter would eventually come back to him. Facing her extremely arrogant evil father, Sehyun's eyes became resolute. She put on the smartwatch that Jung-hyun had given her, thinking to herself that if her father had driven her to this point, she would fight him to the end. That same day, Sehyun went to the genetic analysis warehouse, using the excuse of sending a colleague away. After the man left, she seized the opportunity to slip the strand of hair she had obtained from the murdered man's house into the clothes of a previous victim, the man Sehyun had killed under her father's direction, the man she had intended to make a scapegoat. That man was Ho-gon, the one previously suspected by the police of transporting a large quantity of inflatable dolls in his truck. However, Sehyun's recent suspicious behavior quickly aroused suspicion in a female colleague. A few days earlier, this colleague had contacted Jung-hyun to report the discovery of drug components in the corpse, and the inspector's astonished reaction at the time convinced her that Sehyun had erased the drug test results from the autopsy report. Therefore, this colleague directly criticized Sehyun for altering the autopsy report, and even presented her with a bouquet of roses as a sarcastic gesture. Sehyun remained unfazed unfazed, smashing the vase because she wouldn't be easily intimidated. After much hesitation, Seyan decided to contact Jung-hyun, believing that this upright police officer could help her. Unexpectedly, before she could even make the call, the inspection team arrived, accusing her of altering the report and demanding to search and seize all documents in the office. The mother of forensic pathologist Eo immediately grabbed Seyan to question her, angrily scolding her for changing the report on her son's death and accusing Seyan of covering up for the killer. However, Seyan maintained a cold gaze, pushed the woman's hand away, and told her not to make baseless accusations. Meanwhile, Jung-hyun began to suspect Seyan, believing she was hiding something. From the drug components Seyan deliberately erased from the autopsy report to the blue container found in her rented house, and her almost desperate expression that day, Jung-hyun became even more convinced that there were other hidden aspects to the case. Furthermore, Jung-hyun noticed that the background in a photograph of a girl was a location called Jongheon Port, a coastal area with high sodium content in the seawater. Similar sodium levels were also found in the first blue container case, leading Jung-hyun to suspect that the real crime scene was Jong-un, as depicted in the photograph. If that's the case, the girl in the photo becomes particularly suspicious. Jung-hyun approached Sehyun, asking if she knew the girl in the photo, or if she knew anything about Jongheon Port. He wanted to confirm whether this series of cases was related to her and hoped Sehyun could be honest with him. Previously, Jung-hyun had always believed in Sehyun's original reason for becoming a forensic doctor, believing she did this job to seek justice for the victims. But now, he realized he could no longer trust that judgment. Sehyun didn't explain because she knew the inspector had begun to suspect her. No matter how much she said, his suspicion would always remain. "I hope you catch the culprit soon, and let's never see each other again." After uttering those cruel words, Sehyun's eyes welled up with tears as she turned and walked away. For in this world, she could no longer find anyone who would unconditionally stand by her side. Actually, when she was little, Sehyun had someone she wholeheartedly trusted and relied on, her neighbor's older sister. The sister often came to Sehyun's house, read stories to her, and played with her, becoming the only ray of light in Sehyun's dark childhood. However, seeing how close the other girl was to his daughter, Sehyun's father forcibly took the sister away and locked Sehyun alone in the house. From then on, Sehyun lost the only warmth in her life. Even now, Sehyun often has the illusion that the sister is still by her side, but when the illusion fades, all that remains is despair and an even deeper darkness. That evening, a nurse at the nursing home called to inform Sehyun that her mother's condition was not good, causing her to rush to the hospital. Fortunately, her mother's condition gradually stabilized. Sehyun held her mother's hand, letting old memories slowly resurface in her mind. She remembered the scalpel she always carried with her, engraved with her initials, a gift from her mother. Her mother hoped Sehyun could use the scalpel to help others and always believed that her daughter was a good person. At the same time, under the pretext of delivering laundry, the shop owner secretly left a package in front of the police station. Inside the package was a USB drive, naturally leading the police to suspect that the suitcase shown in the video contained a body. Through investigation, they discovered that the location where Sehyun appeared in the video was very close to the suspect Hogon's house. The police immediately went to Hogon's house and found blood splattered everywhere, but the body had disappeared without a trace. At the scene, they once again found the same type of medication that had appeared in previous cases. Jung-hyun also discovered a blood-stained scalpel with initials engraved on its blade. Combined with Sehyun's forgery of the autopsy report and the suspicious details in the surveillance footage, the police began to suspect Sehyun was the serial killer nicknamed the Tailor. However, Jung-hyun defended Sehyun, arguing that a single incomplete video was insufficient to confirm her as a suspect, and furthermore, it was still unclear whether Hogon was the victim or the fugitive killer. At that moment, a colleague of Sehyun's at the National Academy of Sciences called to confirm that the initials on the scalpel perfectly matched Sehyun's scalpel. Based on this, the police officially identified Sehyun as the suspect. Knowing that Sehyun was at the nursing home visiting her mother, the police immediately set off. At the nursing home, Sehyun discovered a comic book with scribbled drawings hidden under her mother's pillow, an item she had owned since childhood, and she knew very well that her father had placed it there. Sehyun took the comic book and, while watching the news, learned that the police had discovered Hogon's murder and had identified a suspect based on the murder weapon found at the scene. Realizing she was suspected, Sehyun hastily left the nursing home, leaving her missing when the police arrived. At the same time, another group of police officers arrived at Sehyun's rented house in Jongcheon and discovered a blue box containing human organs. Meanwhile, Sehyun had already returned to Jongcheon, cleverly evading the police pursuit and going alone to her father's laundry shop. The shop owner was overjoyed that his daughter had returned. In reality, actions like handing over the surveillance footage of his daughter dragging her suitcase to the police were all aimed at leading them to suspect Seyan. His ultimate goal was to force his daughter to obediently follow his arrangements. But now, the father's threats backfired. In a fit of rage, Seyan grabbed a knife, intending to unexpectedly kill her evil father. But after all these years, she was no match for him. During the struggle, Seyan was subdued. The shop owner furiously punched his daughter, who dared to resist him, then injected her with the drug he used on his victims. After the drug rendered her immobile, the shop owner dragged her into a secret room in his laundry shop. Hearing the distant sirens of police cars, he began his prepared act, messing up his hair, crouching on the ground, pretending to be a victim, and screaming hysterically. The ambulance quickly took the shop owner to the hospital, while the police immediately entered the laundry shop to investigate. At the scene, they found medication and a syringe bearing Seyan's fingerprints, all of which led the police to believe that she had attacked the shop owner. Only Jung-hyun remained suspicious of the so-called crime scene. He found the shop owner's shoes in the laundry shop and noticed that the heels showed clear signs of wear. Not long before, Jung-hyun had discovered a warehouse in the area, and upon entering, he saw many red paint stains on the floor, paying particular attention to footprints imprinted on the paint, with worn heels indicating that the person who left the footprints had a limp. At that moment, the first person Jung-hyun thought of was the shop owner with her familiar limp. But at the moment, his colleagues were all focused on investigating Seyan. The records show she was an orphan and did not have a birth certificate. All information about her before entering the orphanage was completely blank. What surprised the police even more was that the file contained a photo of Seyan at the orphanage, and the Seyan in that photo was the same disheveled girl who appeared in the previous evidence photo. Based on this clue, the police identified Seyan as the seamstress suspect in the serial murder case. Their superiors planned to immediately issue an arrest warrant for her, but Jung-hyun objected. He offered his own perspective and pointed out several suspicious points discovered during the investigation, all of which pointed the suspicion towards the shop owner. Another colleague also discovered that since the second case, Seyan had begun secretly communicating using a phone not registered to her, with signal transmission stations located in the Jamun area and Jamun port, leading the police to suspect that the shop owner might be an accomplice. Just as they were discussing this possibility, the Major Crimes Unit unexpectedly appeared and took over the case, forming a joint investigation team with the Jamun Police Department, with the Major Crimes Unit's captain in charge of the entire operation. Jung-hyun presented his viewpoint to the captain, arguing that a genius forensic doctor like Seyan couldn't possibly have left any traces at the scene, and furthermore, the case still had too many suspicious points. Therefore, he hoped to continue investigating and clarifying these suspicions instead of hastily issuing an arrest warrant. However, the captain pointed the finger at Jung-hyun, saying that he had heard that Jung-hyun had discovered the altered autopsy report early but hadn't reported it to his superiors. Moreover, someone had seen him leaving Sehyun's rented house. The captain suspected a romantic relationship between the two and believed that Jung-hyun was deliberately covering for her. Feeling resentful, Jung-hyun decisively snatched the case file and fled. The file contained Sehyun's call history, showing that she had contacted a psychiatric hospital multiple times. Jung-hyun went to this hospital and learned several important clues from Sehyun's primary care doctor. It turned out that the mother in Sehyun's nursing home wasn't her biological mother, but her adoptive mother, the nun who had rescued and raised Sehyun from a young age. When she first adopted her, the nun noticed Sehyun frequently caught small animals, brought them home, and dissected them. Psychological tests revealed that Sehyun suffered from severe antisocial personality disorder, lacking guilt and empathy. However, the nun still placed her hope in the girl. She once asked Sehyun why she treated animals this way, and Sehyun replied that after dissecting them, she would sew them back together and dig a small grave to bury them properly. That answer made the nun realize that deep within Sehyun's subconscious, there still existed goodness, and for that reason, she decided to adopt her and became Sehyun's mother. The doctor explained to Jung-hyun that childhood psychological traumas are not easily healed, and after the nun was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, Sehyun had to constantly suppress the evil within her to control her desire to harm animals, even to kill people. For the past 5 years, Sehyun only ate dry energy bars because she understood that killing people required a lot of strength, and replacing 3 main meals with energy bars would help her maintain her physical strength at the lowest level. Sehyun did all this to keep her promise to her mother, and the doctor believed that someone like her would not be capable of murder. However, the head of the Serious Crime Unit, eager to make a name for himself, ignored the warnings and insisted on holding a press conference and issuing a warrant for Sehyun. Sehyun's arrest. Upon seeing the news that his daughter was wanted, the laundromat owner was overjoyed, believing that this time she would surely learn a lesson she would never forget. He then contacted someone else, requesting that they prepare a train as soon as possible to take his daughter away from this place. At this time, Sehyun had been secretly transferred to her father's container truck. While the shop owner was in the hospital, his adopted daughter, who was also Sehyun's adopted younger sister, was tasked with watching over her. Sehyun tried to convince her younger sister, insisting that everything their father said was a lie. But unexpectedly, the girl had been heavily brainwashed by the shop owner and stubbornly defended their father in front of Sehyun. She asked her sister to help untie her, but to no avail. The girl seemed to have been instructed by their father beforehand and remained highly vigilant. Looking at the girl's face, the image of her older sister from years ago flashed through Sehyun's mind. The sister with whom she had shared every piece of bread, taught her magic, and played with her. That period was the only happiness in Sehyun's long life. One night, Sehyun woke up to find the door of the container truck open. A glimmer of hope flickered in her, and she struggled to crawl out, only to find her father waiting there. He had prepared a barbecue stall and showed Sehyun the latest video, in which superiors and colleagues at the National Forensic Institute were all attacking her, exposing the harsh realities of life. Since Sehyun became a wanted fugitive, all those who envied or wanted to exploit her had seized this opportunity to add fuel to the fire. The shop owner reminded his daughter that all people are the same, and that the only person she could trust and rely on in this world was her father. He then decided to start over with his daughter, returning to the loving days they had shared before. As for his adopted daughter, the shop owner planned to get rid of her. He instructed Sehyun to deal with her herself, and then they would leave together the next morning. To the shop owner, the girl was merely a replacement in Sehyun's absence. Once again, Sehyun felt her father's cruelty acutely, and to escape him once and for all, she silently lunged at him with a knife, but he managed to stop and subdue her in time. The shop owner decided he had to punish his disobedient daughter. Without a word, he grabbed a knife and stabbed her, injuring Sehyun's arm, which her younger sister then bandaged. At the same time, Mr. Gon, whom the police had initially believed to have been murdered, unexpectedly appeared at the police station, completely unharmed. Mr. Gon lifted his shirt, revealing a stitched-up wound in his abdomen, and explained that someone had attacked him, but then stitched up his wound. According to Mr. Gon's identification, the attacker was none other than Sehyun, and it turned out that Sehyun hadn't actually killed anyone. While stitching up Mr. Gon's wound, Sehyun had warned him that if he didn't want to die, he had to hide for a week, so Mr. Gon disappeared for a whole week, leading everyone to believe he had been murdered. However, according to Mr. Gon's testimony, the initial attacker was not Sehyun, but another man, who smelled strongly of bleach. This testimony further fueled Jung-hyun's suspicion of the shop owner, as he recalled finding a large container of bleach at the shop when he visited. At this point, Jung-hyun was certain the shop owner was involved in the case, and also determined that he had a special relationship with Sehyun. Responding to Jung-hyun's request, several colleagues at the police station decided to cooperate, planning to search the shop owner's laundry while he was away. Inside the laundry, the police discovered a room with pink-painted walls, resembling a girl's room, and upon collecting clues, they were astonished to find no fingerprints whatsoever. Just then, the shop owner returned from the hospital. The youngest colleague on guard outside immediately signaled, causing the police officers inside to frantically rearrange everything back into place. Meanwhile, the quick-witted young colleague struck up a conversation with the shop owner to buy time, allowing the senior officers to safely retreat. Thanks to his help, the police were able to leave smoothly. However, the highly vigilant shop owner quickly noticed something unusual. He discovered signs of a break-in and realized that the police had searched the premises. That evening, the shop owner received a phone call from the police, requesting him to come to the station for questioning. He agreed, but secretly switched off his phone immediately after hanging up. Realizing he was under suspicion, the shop owner decided to flee with his daughter that very night. The police were equally vigilant, relentlessly investigating the shop owner. They discovered he had rented a car and quickly identified the license plate, while also extracting surveillance camera footage to continuously track his movements. Jung-hyun followed them in his car, but the shop owner, being overly cautious, noticed him, and to avoid alerting the suspect, turned his car around. The shop owner returned to the hidden container truck to check his daughter's hand injury. Sehyun's wounds were severe, and she needed to be taken to the hospital, but with the time to board the ship fast approaching, he could only ask his adopted daughter to take good care of her. Just then, Sehyun called out, "Dad, I'm in so much pain." This was the first time since they had reunited that she had called him Dad, and at her vulnerability, the shopkeeper's gaze softened. When his adopted daughter went outside, the shopkeeper hugged Sehyun, speaking words of concern and care like like a normal father. A little while later, she returned but couldn't buy the medicine, saying that the pharmacist told her they required a doctor's prescription. The shopkeeper became suspicious. He looked at his adopted daughter's palm to see what medicine she had written, but she had erased the writing. Seyan seized the opportunity, once again feigning weakness, begging her father to take her to the pharmacy to buy some first aid medicine. The shop owner, softening his heart, disregarded the risk of being discovered by the police and took both daughters outside. At the pharmacy, while the father was buying medicine, Seyan secretly took a spray bottle. Taking advantage of his inattention, she sprayed it directly into his face. Then, while he was in pain, she shouted for the staff to call the police, and then tried to run away with her adopted younger sister. Unexpectedly, the father quickly caught up, realizing he had been betrayed, and unleashed a furious beating on his daughter. In that critical moment, Junghyun appeared just in time, shielding and protecting Sehyun. The shop owner immediately pulled out a knife, viciously stabbing him from behind and repeatedly punching him, preventing him from getting even a step closer to his daughter. Just then, the alarm sounded, and the shop owner, trying to leave with his injured daughter, was held back by Junghyun. The police officers got out of their car, pointed their guns, and ordered the man to surrender. However, the shop owner took his own adopted daughter hostage, holding her tightly before brazenly driving away. Sehyun used her injured hand to tightly bandage Junghyun's wound, while he apologized for not trusting her that day. Facing the severely injured Junghyun, Sehyun cried out in despair, not wanting to lose another person who had wholeheartedly protected her. After surgery, Sehyun was out of danger. The first thing she said upon waking was to ask about Junghyun's condition. He was alive, but still unconscious. The only fortunate thing was that after this incident, the team members finally narrowed down the shop owner, began reviewing the police department's system, and planned to find all the information about the fugitive. The shop owner himself realized that things had come to this point because Sehyun had secretly signaled to his adopted daughter. The night before at the pharmacy, the girl had clearly seen Sehyun pick up the spray bottle, but deliberately didn't tell her father. To punish his adopted daughter, the shop owner placed a blue bucket on her head and forced her to kneel on the ground all day. Soon after, the police found a bar owner who knew the shop owner's wife, Mrs. Lai, and from her account, they gradually learned the whole truth. Years ago, the shop owner married Mrs. Lai, and they had Sehyun, but before that marriage, Mrs. Lai had a daughter who was Sehyun's older sister and the shop owner's illegitimate child. In another development, security cameras captured a crucial discovery. A convenience store camera showed Sehyun hiding a notebook in a wall crevice. Because of this detail, the head of the serious crime unit directly confronted Sehyun to question her about her relationship with the shop owner. He suspected that the name Unseld, written in the notebook, was Sehyun's real name, and also mentioned her older sister, as her sister's photo was pasted in the notebook. Sehyun agreed to tell the whole truth, but before that, she requested that the police arrange a press conference for her, as she intended to use it as bait to force the murderer, who was also her father, to reveal himself. To prevent any more innocent people from being harmed, Sehyun regained her composure and resolved to confront her father directly. Just as the press conference was about to begin, Junghyun also woke up and witnessed Sehyun, covered in injuries but still bravely standing up firsthand. At the press conference, Sehyun, with a resolute gaze, publicly revealed her true identity. She is the biological daughter of the murderer involved in 6 consecutive dismemberment cases. She recounted her painful past, from being forced to help her father dispose of corpses throughout her childhood. Furthermore, Sehyun publicly disclosed all the murders her father committed, including the time, location, and identities of the victims, details she still remembers vividly. She also bowed her head and apologized to the public for having altered the autopsy report. At the same time, she mentioned her father's adopted daughter, a younger sister whose childhood was exactly like hers, and who was almost about to become a second Sehyun, expressing hope that society would pay more attention to save this innocent girl from the abyss. After the press conference, Sehyun again asked the head of the serious crime unit to reduce the level of protection for her to the lowest level, because only then would her father agree to come to her as they wanted. A while later, Sehyun went to Junghyun's hospital room, where he was flipping through the notebook she had left behind, filled with cute stickers and colorful scribbled drawings, enough to imagine how warm the time spent with her older sister had been for Sehyun. Junghyun asked why she didn't use the smartwatch he gave her to call for help, and Sehyun replied that she had given it to her adopted younger sister because she understood that if she didn't save her in time, her future would be even worse than what she had experienced. While flipping through that cute notebook, Sehyun told Junghyun the rest of her past. That year, forced to be her father's assistant in murder cases, Sehyun's childhood was confined to a white truck used for disposing of corpses. Her father didn't allow her to go to school, go outside, or make friends, making everything a normal child could do a luxury. At that time, it was her older sister who taught her to read, write, and draw, and in little Seyan's eyes, her sister was always the brightest shining light. However, in the end, her older sister discovered the horrifying secret between Seyan and her father, determined to elope with her. Ironically, their plan was discovered by their father. That night, right in front of Seyan, her father pushed his illegitimate daughter off the cliff, causing her to hit her head and bleed profusely. To protect her sister, Seyan stood on the edge of the cliff to threaten her father, but in a moment of distraction, her sister bit him hard on the hand. The shopkeeper fell down the cliff, but the two sisters were rescued and determined to escape the forest. Along the way, the older sister complimented Seyan on her beautiful school uniform, hoping that someday they could go to school together and play like other children. At that moment, the older sister saw a car passing by and was about to wave for help, but Seyan stopped her. Deeply influenced by her father, Seyan always believed that the outside world was full of bad people. Because of this suspicion, the injured older sister missed the opportunity for timely medical attention, causing her wounds to become too severe, and she died en route, collapsing in Seyan's arms. Now, reflecting on her life, Seyan can't help but feel fortunate to have met her kind older sister and foster mother, but her foster sister was different. She only had her father by her side and a bottomless abyss that constantly dragged her down. Therefore, compared to herself, Seyan yearned even more to protect that little girl, a child who could have grown up in the sunshine. Junghyun instructed Seyan that this time he hoped she wouldn't think of acting alone. No matter what evil she faced, he would be there with her. Just as Seyan predicted, her father, the shop owner, had seen the news about the press conference and learned of his daughter's whereabouts. To take his daughter away, the shop owner disguised himself and went to the hospital. In the hallway, Seyan recognized her father with just a glance. The shop owner whispered to his daughter to follow him. Seyan followed her father to the stairwell, and the first question she asked was about her foster sister's whereabouts. The shop owner said the girl was downstairs, and if Seyan didn't want her to die, she had to follow him, because this was her only chance. After saying that, the shop owner extended his hand towards his daughter, but unexpectedly, a police officer on guard duty suddenly appeared, disrupting the shop owner's plan and forcing him to hastily leave. Following this incident, the police decided to search for the shop owner's white truck. Based on the crimes he had committed, the police analyzed the evidence and discovered that all of them occurred along the coast, leading them to suspect the shop owner intended to illegally cross the border. They planned to begin searching at ports where illegal border crossings frequently occurred. Seyan was expected to appear in 3 days and then be transferred to the Seoul prosecutor's office, so the team leader ordered that the shop owner be found and arrested within 72 hours. At the same time, his adopted younger sister said she had gone to a nearby small supermarket and used her meager savings to buy a loaf of bread. At the store, she happened to see Sehyun's speech at the press conference. The supermarket owner noticed her, but she quickly ran away, and this scene was witnessed by a reporter. The reporter, wanting exclusive news, secretly followed her to the shop owner's hiding place, only to be discovered and brutally murdered. The entire scene of her adoptive father murdering someone, along with the cold smile on his face, was witnessed by the little girl. Sehyun asked Junghyun about the progress of the case, and he said that the whereabouts of her adoptive sister had not yet been found. Remembering her father's threats, Sehyun couldn't help but worry. She wanted to directly participate in the investigation, but Junghyun refused. That day, the police received a package containing a high school girl's uniform, the same clothes her older sister had left behind years ago, and the person who had been wearing them all this time was her adoptive sister. A police officer took the clothes to the National Institute of Science for examination. Meanwhile, Junghyun tried to comfort Sehyun, believing that the clothes alone, without a body, meant the girl might still be alive. However, Sehyun remained pessimistic, convinced that her sister had been harmed. Finally, she told Junghyun that her father had secretly come to see her, hoping to be allowed to leave the hospital. She wanted to find her father, because if they missed this opportunity, they might never find her body again. But Junghyun resolutely refused. He couldn't let Sehyun fall into danger again. Before leaving, Junghyun instructed his subordinates guarding the ward to monitor it 24/7 and absolutely not allow Sehyun to leave. Sehyun's mind was filled with her father's threats and a heavy sense of guilt towards her adopted sister. She believed that her sister's fate was her own fault for not following her father. A nurse brought a bouquet of flowers. Sehyun looked at it and discovered a location written on the card inside. She understood perfectly well that it was the message her father had left for her. To escape the ward, Sehyun deliberately smashed the window, used the broken glass to threaten the police, and then took the opportunity to flee. Afterward, she changed into a nurse's uniform, sneaked into the pharmacy to steal necessary medications, and then left through the emergency exit. Meanwhile, to search for the shop owner and the girl, Jung-hyun led the team members in a thorough investigation, eventually locating the supermarket the girl had visited the previous night. From the supermarket owner's account, they learned that the girl was living in an empty house nearby. The police immediately went to the house, which was actually a warehouse, pried open the door, and found a victim inside with a blue bucket placed over their head. However, when they removed the bucket, the victim was not the girl, but the reporter. The method of committing this crime was completely different from the previous victims, leading the police to believe that the shop owner was under immense psychological pressure. If he wasn't arrested immediately, more serious cases might still be waiting to happen. Meanwhile, in an attempt to help his daughter escape, the shop owner went to see the owner of a company specializing in organizing illegal border crossings, but the man said there was only one seat left on the train that night. The shop owner paid no attention, but when the other man wasn't looking, he used his strength to knock him down and took the immigration card from his office. If there wasn't enough room, he could just remove one person. In short, he absolutely wouldn't leave his adopted daughter alone. At this moment, in the darkness, the adopted daughter woke from her coma and found herself tied up and locked inside a huge blue metal box. She cried helplessly, banging against the sides of the box, but outside was just a desolate area, seemingly unaware of her existence. After a search, the police found the shop owner's white truck nearby, and upon checking inside, they realized it was fully equipped, like a miniature autopsy room. At the same time, the adopted younger sister, trapped in the metal box, still tried to call for help, and suddenly remembered the watch Seyan had left her. Recalling Sehyun's instructions on how to activate the watch, the little girl pressed the button and selected the alarm option, immediately sending a distress message from the device to Jung-hyun's phone. Remembering that Seyan had given the watch to her, Jung-hyun instantly recognized that the person calling for help was his adopted younger sister. Using the GPS, he led his team to the scene and eventually discovered the blue metal container, rescuing the girl who was trapped inside, though she was barely breathing. Meanwhile, Sehyun went to the beach to meet her father, who wanted to take her across the border, hoping to start over with his daughter. In his eyes, he was the only one in the world who truly loved Sehyun and understood her unique qualities. Sehyun responded to those words with a cold smile, then took out the vial of deadly poison she had secretly obtained from the hospital and drank it right in front of her father. Seeing his daughter writhing in pain after drinking the poison, the shop owner once again revealed the soft-heartedness of a father. He hurriedly carried his daughter on his back, intending to go find a doctor, but Sehyun suddenly woke up. While her father wasn't looking, she pulled out a syringe and injected it straight into her evil father's neck. This was Sehyun's real plan. She wanted to die together with her father, but absolutely had no intention of dying before him. Because of the injection, her father's muscles gradually weakened. Sehyun then took out a scalpel, intending to cut her father's body repeatedly to force the devil to experience the pain. Fortunately, at that critical moment, Jung-hyun arrived with the team and informed Sehyun that she was still alive. Sehyun gave a bitter laugh and stopped what she was doing. She vowed that she would take her younger sister to visit him in prison later, believing that this was the most fitting punishment for the devil. That night, Sehyun and her father were arrested simultaneously. Fortunately, because Sehyun was not directly involved in the murder, the police did not intend to prosecute her. After being released, Sehyun went to thank Jung-hyun because it was thanks to his sincerity and warmth that she was able to get to where she was today. Under the bright sunlight, for the first time in her life, Sehyun felt peace in her soul. When things had calmed down, Sehyun visited her foster mother at the nursing home, and this time, her foster mother recognized her. In her eyes, Sehyun was still as beautiful and kind as ever. After the crime was closed by the people involved, each person's life turned a new page. Jung-hyun volunteered to transfer to the local police station, gradually becoming closer and understanding with the colleagues who had once misunderstood her. Meanwhile, Seyan began taking care of her younger sister, choosing pretty clothes and a school bag for her, helping her gradually emerge from the darkness to become happier and more outgoing. That day, Jung-hyun came to the store, personally put the name tag and school bag on her, and as they stepped out of their gloomy past, the three of them became a true family. The criminal, the shop owner, is finally thrown into prison, living his days in constant fear, never finding peace. He frequently experiences hallucinations, believing his daughter is still by his side, still his accomplice in his murders. One day, Sehyun goes to the mountain where she personally buried her older sister many years ago, and at her sister's resting place, a small sapling has sprouted from the ground. Looking at the vibrant green, a symbol of hope, the gloom in Sehyun's eyes disappears, replaced by a sparkling light. The film ends here. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel to watch more great films. Goodbye, and see you again.